Say, for the sake of argument, that you owed almost $90,000 to the IRS and various creditors because you forgot to check your mail because you were just that much on the YouTube grind. What do? Actually, let's just get rid of all pretenses. You're $90,000 in debt. Sorry, almost. But by begging to your equally broke-ass audience, you were able to raise enough money, plus some, to cover all of your debts and financially organize yourself for at least a couple of years, with the only expectation being that you make more YouTube content. You know, the thing you already do anyways. Do you actually pay off your debts and get right to work on the videos as a form of gratitude towards your audience? Or do you take the money and go on a multi-month luxury dream vacation to Japan? You'll never guess which option Innuendo Studios decided to take. What's up, guys? This is Mr. Asian Pie. You know, I never understood the term twink death until I saw the transformation of this poor soul. This is Ian Danskin, who over the course of almost 2 election cycles went from looking like a mid-2010 steampunk brony to a fat Simon Whistler. He's probably most well known for being one of the smaller voices in the anti-Gamergate crowd, being an early breadtuber, backing types such as Lindsay Ellis, Zoe Quinn, and Brianna Wu. Lastly, Ian was also an early advocate for cuckoldry and open relationships, though he's since walked back the latter. I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but Ian's online footprint is what Gen Alpha kids like to call prehistoric. Despite nowadays being recognized as a patriarch of modern breadtube, Ian actually started his online arc as another dirty incel troll from the depths of pre-culture war 4chan. Or so he says. Though, what is at least verifiable is that Ian's online presence showed that he seemed to have already had a hard ideological conversion to male feminism early on, conveniently right before the outbreak of Gamergate. Nonetheless, this unique perspective amongst his now fellow comrades gave Ian the unique qualification of being the guy who used to be on the other side. As a result, Ian would use his status and mental prowess to resist the alluring pull of the intellectualism of racist weebs and horny lolberts to create his uncontested magnum opus, the alt-right playbook. This series of videos in particular have become extremely popular amongst breadtube and Twitch streamers, being cited by other left-wing creators to understand the mental insights of the alt-right. In a twist of irony though, despite the series being called the alt-right playbook, it gives more insights to the worldview of a leftist than of that of any rightoid. This is most exemplified in the introduction video of the series, where simultaneously Ian acknowledges that the right-wing coalition, even back in 2016, is extremely fractured with different factions of the right holding incredibly different worldviews and ideologies, but nonetheless lumps them all together as one rhetorically incoherent euphemism because it was easier for him to address them that way. Essentially, that would be akin to me making a series called The Leftist Playbook, and right in the introduction, I lump various factions of the left such as progressives, socially liberal libertarians, egalitarian socialists, and old-school communists as one homogenous group called leftist. Then swiftly follow up my remarks of who is a leftist by saying that the homunculus blob of a political faction I just invented in my head has no real coherent ideology with absolutely no hint of any sort of implication that I'm casting the widest umbrella term possible. Ian then concludes that the only winning move is not to play, and dissuades his audience from any form of civil engagement with the other side because no matter what, you will be the one living rent-free in those losers' minds while you go out and touch grass. You can probably see how this series is quite underminable. Would it surprise you to learn that this guy is an unironic accelerationist despite claiming that he's trying to deradicalize people? From here though, the series just somehow degrades in quality. They go from being semi-structured 30 to 40 minute videos to literal ramblings that are slightly over 5 minutes on the higher end. The writing level also somehow degrades, as if he already wasn't at the bottom of the barrel. The alt-right playbook just evolved into being a way for him to air out his grievances about random interactions in real life or online that were still for some reason running through his head. Considering the conclusion drawn in the series' introduction stating that the online debates will still be living rent-free in those stupid alt-writers' heads while you go out and live in the real world, it kinda just sounds like projection in hindsight. For example, in the episode Negging and Love Bombing, Ian is just ranting about a dude he argued with on the Wikipedia forum. The main debate was about religious ethnostates, and he admits in the video that he had little knowledge about Israel, which for context was one of the 2 main cruxes of the overall debate. He then concludes that his opponent being nice to him about not being well read on the subject of Israel was equivalent to him being groomed by like a child molester. How the fuck do you even draw to that conclusion? Why would you admit to this? You just look like a fucking dumbass. Though, actually, now that I think about it, considering some other things Ian has openly admitted to, adding himself as a dumbass is quite trivial. That brings us on to... boobies. Much like a true male feminist, Ian has an incredibly complicated relationship with women. As stated earlier, in the lead-up to Gamergate, Ian had already established himself as someone who was firmly in the feminist camp. The predecessor to the alt-right playbook was a pro-feminist series called Why Are You So Angry?, where he mints his words and doesn't actually say anything nor make any points. Just like a real woman, all yapping and no substance. The series is presented in a way that seems like he's going to explain why the anti-feminist backlash is occurring, but instead he just rehashes what happened with no explanation to why beyond men are sexist. All of this is to say is that Ian developed an incredibly hardcore feminazi audience. So, when he admitted to sending a weird email to a female game developer he had a crush on, his audience reacted extremely poorly to it. Not helping the case was the fact that he framed it as if he sexually harassed the developer in question. Though the real cherry on top of all of it is that when his primarily feminist fanbase negatively reacted to the admission of guilt of what they considered sexual harassment, partially due to his own framing, he lashed out against them on Twitter. The saddest part is he probably never needed to admit to this because the email was partially anonymous and mostly forgotten about by the time he confessed to it. For perspective, the email was sent around 2009. Ian made a blog post confessing to it in 2012 for seemingly no reason, and then he got the backlash from his audience in 2015, so he didn't even have to admit to this. Well, he also didn't have to admit to the fact that he never used 4chan either, which invalidates the credentials that made him incredibly popular in the first place. You probably could have picked that up from the fact that he was already a feminist pre-culture war, believed 4chan had a front page, much like Reddit, and considered parts of Reddit to be far right. But a little honesty never hurts. What does hurt to learn, though, are his sexual proclivities, which he's a little too honest about. Now, I'll admit it, I'm an absolute incel, but I do not envy Ian in the slightest. That I will tell you. No less to the fact that he gets a hard-on to the idea of his dustborn OC of a girlfriend savagely getting her while he sits in the corner and listens to her moan. Cuckoldry advocacy has legitimately been one of the few things Ian has been quite consistent about. One of his oldest digital footprints is a Huffington Post article from late 2012 where Ian and his girlfriend are interviewed about how they deal with jealousy in a polyamorous relationship. It gets worse. During the early pandemic, Ian released a video claiming that the term cuck is a white supremacist dog whistle, ending with the conclusion that people who support monogamy are actually white supremacists who are deeply insecure about being emasculated by BBC. So due to that insecurity, they vent their frustration by calling people like Ian cuckolds. I don't even know how he even draws to that conclusion, considering that a major portion of the runtime is about Steve Harvey, indirectly outing his fetish to his family because someone who worked with Steve Harvey found the Huffington Post interview and reached out to ask if Ian and his girlfriend wanted to be on the show. With the context, it seems to me that Ian is the only one who needs to vent because he was being emasculated. By Steve Harvey of all people. Though, no matter how much of a humiliation ritual an episode on Steve Harvey's show would have been, he probably should have followed up on that considering he desperately needed all the financial opportunities he could jump on. You see, much like any good socialist, Ian is a financially illiterate dumbass and has the discipline and work ethic of a child. He wouldn't even be considered legally unemployed since he never actively searched for a job, designating YouTube as his work and in turn relying on YouTube ad revenue and sponsors. Except no! Ian turned off ad revenue on his videos and never took sponsorship, seeing himself above that, meaning his main source of income for the better part of a decade were Patreon donations and shaming his audience on Twitter for not giving him more money. Despite how stupid this is, surprisingly, this strategy worked, with Ian raking in a stable $3.5k monthly since 2019, meaning he was getting around $42,000 annually. Not a great amount of money, but considering since January 2019 he's only produced 33 YouTube videos, the activity he considered his main job, that really isn't that bad. And yet Ian still managed to dig himself into $90,000 worth of almost $90,000 worth of financial debt. A major contributing factor to the financial folly has to do with where he and his girlfriend live. You see, Ian lives in Massachusetts, already one of the most expensive states in the Union. But he doesn't just live in any part of Massachusetts. He specifically chose to reside in Jamaica Plains, Massachusetts, one of the most affluent townships in the country. For reference, over $1,000 monthly rent for a one-room apartment is considered average in this area, no less for a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. I would like to reiterate that this dude's only source of income was solely Patreon because he didn't take sponsorships and he turned off ad revenue for his channel. I have a dog shit CPM and even I know that you can get a nice chunk of change with a 1,000,000 view video, no less multiple. Adding on to all of this, due to Ian's crippling laziness, he failed to check his mailbox regularly, resulting in him owing 7 years worth of back taxes to the IRS and a bunch of credit card debts, likely with interest. This prompted Ian to make an emergency video called Being a YouTuber Bankrupted Me, in which he begged his audience for money. Would it surprise you to learn that it worked? No less, it exceeded his goal by almost double. A major reason why the campaign was so successful was because he promised his audience 225 minutes worth of new content if his goals were met. Obviously, his backers were expecting new content along the lines of the alt-right pipeline or Why Are You So Angry, his two most popular series. Once the donations concluded though, he pulled the rug and revealed that the content he'd make might be an album cover or some karaoke or something. He also revealed simultaneously that he was taking the money and running away to Japan instead of, paying off his debts and making more substantial content like he promised his backers. Did I mention that this guy is on SNAP benefits? Unlike other breadtubers, I personally do find Ian quite charming in a way, considering that he's still obsessed about culture war talking points that haven't been relevant in almost a decade. His videos are disjointed nonsense on par with the quality of someone like No Bullshit. Though unlike No Bullshit, Ian is still quite popular, with his videos being cited by modern breadtubers as an insight into the mind of a rightoid, despite the credentials of his insights being self-admittedly fraudulent. In a lot of ways, Ian is the prototypical blueprint of a modern leftist, from the nonsensical worldview, the accelerationism, the projection, the fraudulent credentials, the financial illiteracy, and so on. Ultimately, people such as Ian exist so dumb fucks like you and I can feel better about our less savory life choices. Though still, you should probably correct those behaviors regardless, as to not end up like Innuendo Studios. This has been Mr. Asian Pie. See you on the flip, and don't be stupid.